And in the movie, Bogart pulls an olive out of a martini glass and he shoves it in his uncle's mouth and says, "Eat it." And I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing on in a movie. And I was just tickled pink by myself late at night watching that. And then it came back to me in Australia. And I said, "Well, I can use this rat for something." And I tucked it in my pocket. Everyone's looking at me like, "What's Nick doing with the prop rat?" That's my board. And I want it back.
Listen, mate, I think you've been out in the sun too long.
No, my father gave me that board.
I can tell you myself, that old board's been up there for as long as I can remember.
She's a beaut, isn't she?
This film, like, there's such a linear descent into chaos. And so I know it's not common to sort of shoot in order, but I wondered if this one, if you did.
As much as possible, right? I mean, we kind of, even with the first scene we shot was Nick arriving in the car and talking to his son. And we tried to shoot as much of it in sequence as we could. We shot out the car park mostly and then went down to the beach, and then we had to come back at the car park to burn the car and stuff like that. But I think that did help though, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, but for me, one of the things I really love about Lorcan's movie is how nonlinear the narrative is. And there were times when we were filming, and to be fully transparent, I didn't entirely know what Lorcan was getting up to with the flashbacks and also the foretelling backs, if you were, forward shots of who is this man and or is he this other person, or what is this memory, or is this the future? And I saw the movie twice, and I really loved the movie, and I loved it even more the second time because to me, Lorcan is an artist who has a signature, and he has it in his head where he's going. And I didn't question it. I mean, when we were filming it, I just went with it because I knew, having seen Vivarium and the fact that he would even want to make a movie like this script, which is really weird and compelling in an alternative way, and that speaks to me. So I just went along for the ride, but it was all in Lorcan's head where he wanted to put the flashbacks and the shots of the future.
I wasn't even entirely sure myself, to be honest. It was more like an intuitive thing of knowing I needed these pieces. I wasn't sure exactly where they were going to go yet in the tapestry of the film, but didn't know that I wanted the film to feel like that, like a tapestry of events where the future is linked to the past and the past linked to the future. And because it's kind of a weird Jungian journey, the whole film.
Yes.
But the effects he got out of the camera, like a lot of that was in camera, the water and the rippling and the sunlight heat effects. I mean, that was all very thought out and quite new for me. And it immensely helped the character and where the performance was going in, maybe even how the audience should receive the performance. So it was a good marriage. It was a good collaboration.
Nicholas, it's interesting that you brought up kind of the weirdness and the absurdity of this film. When we talked for Long Legs, we talked about kind of how Hollywood considers sort of the arbiter of great acting to be 1970s naturalism, and how you've kind of, sort of surreal and maybe some genre films can kind of push back on that. And I wondered if you could talk about sort of when you became aware of that and why that's been something you've wanted to consciously push back against.
It was a feeling of not wanting to get trapped or calcified in the realm of artwork, and thinking that the art that I admired in painters like Francis Bacon or in music, a lot of it was surrealistic. And so in my view, if there's such a thing as art synthesis, why can't you do it with acting? Just like you can do it with Twyla Tharp or Bob Fosse dance, or why can't you do it with acting? But the trick with that is you can do it with acting, but it still has to land with the director and with the script in such a way where it moves the story forward and doesn't become self-indulgent and look at me and pretentious. It has to be a twist and a unique point of expression that evolves the story. So how do you do that? Well, if the guy's losing his mind, that's one way. Then you can get a bit more abstract with facial expressions or voice. Or if the guy is on drugs, that's one way, like Bad Lieutenant. In this case, or like the surfer is having a bit of a breakdown. It totally stands to reason. in a natural, authentic way that he would shriek, eat the rat, and shove it into some guy's mouth because it's been earned. We've seen it scratched so long that of course he's gonna, and hopefully with any luck, the audience will be along for the ride. And I'm not the first to play with it. I mean, even in the old days, like Jimmy Cagney, top of the world, Ma, or I look at some actors all the time that aren't afraid to go in these different directions. And you know, but that's not to say that the naturalism of the 70s isn't great. It is great. And that's something I enjoy doing as well.
Sure.
And Big certainly allowed me to do that, or movies like Birdie, what have you. But it just, I didn't want to get trapped, and I wanted to work with filmmakers like Lorcan or Borgley or, you know, that, or Panos, who aren't afraid to have some alternative approach to the narrative. I mean, what I don't want is play a catchy tune and it gets stuck in your head and you get sick of it.
And realism can be, you know, the idea of realism is even an abstract idea because like what's real, it's a very subjective thing. Right. So especially with this film, we're telling it through Nick's character's subjective experience. So it had to be heightened in some way, you know.
Lorcan, I mean, you talked about in the director's notes, but then also, you know, it's obvious there's a lot of exploration of masculinity and tribalism and territory and things like this, like very, like inherent things. But then it's so funny because he starts off like so buttoned up and so corporate, right? And I just wondered for you, I mean, obviously there's no shortage of conversation with that, especially the masculinity aspect. Is that something that you kind of think a lot about, and why you wanted to tell that story?
Not really. It was just in the story. It was part of the story. So to me, it wasn't a film about like toxic masculinity. I mean, there was elements of this like masculinity in crisis, and that's something that does exist. But to me, it was serving the story in a way because Nick's character had to have this counter, you know, in this scally character, Julian, who's like, and his character, you know, Nick's character had lost his father when he was young, and he was searching for some sort of belonging, and that's why he was thinking like he buys back this house and this materialistic kind of goal will fix his relationship problems and stuff. So like Julian's character offers up something different, like, you know, he's kind of seductive, you know, if you want to be in our gang and you want to be part of this bay boy culture, you have to kind of do all of these things, you know. And I think like a lot of those figures in the world of toxic masculinity are a bit like that. You know, they're charming, they a lot of the time have these philosophical ideas, and they're well read, so they seem very attractive to these guys who are kind of lost, you know. So I didn't want the film though to be about that. It kind of is part of baked into the whole story, because really it's the surfer's journey through that, you know. So he needs that. And also, I think like Julian, the way he played it, it was like he wanted to help you, right? Not like, so he's an ambiguous character as well. It's, you know, it's not black and white as to whether he's doing something good or bad. He's just sort of openly discussing it with these guys down on the beach. So I think it's up to the audience really to kind of make their mind up about that.
The need to belong to anything, to just belong. I mean, you're looking at a man who lost his wife. She's now with another man. She's going to have another baby. Can't connect with his teenage son. Well, he's eventually we discover he's quite broken, and there's many holes in his personal history, and he's trying to belong and fill that hole. It happens all around us all the time. You become a member of the police force. You join the army. You join the, you know, it happens to young people that can't connect with their parents. They run away, they join a gang. So it's all very real stuff, you know. Like Lorcan said, it's not necessarily what the movie's about, but it's certainly a very real element of it.
Yeah, and I am curious for you, Nicholas, like you obviously have done your fair share of sort of explorations of kind of inherent violence.
Well, I mean, as someone who doesn't like violence and actively tries to avoid violence in my life, I would say that it seems to be something that lends itself to cinema. And it's something that whatever gets a person to that point of violence is usually fascinating and compelling drama. And that's a part of that's one of the backbones of cinema. And as someone who makes movies and has made movies for almost 50 years, it stands, you know, that I'm going to be making movies that explore that element, but hopefully that's not all I'm making. I also enjoy movies that could be just about the quiet times I have with my children, or a comedy or something goofy, or, you know, but violence is definitely a pillar in cinema.
Yeah. Yeah. I think David Lynch used to say like something about like basically like cinema is violent because it like reflects our world and, you know, instead of sort of dictating.
Yeah, and visually, it can also reflect an inner world. It doesn't necessarily mean it's happening externally, but it could be something you feel as an audience member inside, internally. It can be reflective of that. I mean, David was somebody that was really a wizard at generating visual imagery that has you scratching your head and thinking, why is that affecting me so much? It's not weird for weird's sake. It's different, but I'm still thinking about it. What was that? Even something odd as David Lynch in Twin Peaks doing this on camera with his hand on his head. Why are you doing that? But I mean, he was a maestro of surrealist imagery that actually communicated something on a deeper level, almost like Lorcan mentioned Jung. I mean, the inner, the dream state, whatever those images are that make us feel something that are inexplicable.
I didn't realize that this was based on the Bad Boys is a real surfer gang, right? Lorcan.
Well, there's guys in Lanuda Bay in California that it's a very expensive, exclusive area, this sort of crescent-shaped beach with these big modernist houses up along the cliff, you know. And if you try and surf on their beach, and these guys are all like wealthy, you know, hedge fund managers and CEOs and stuff, they will attack you on the beach. So, I mean, that was an inspiration for the story. An element of the inspiration. And Tom, the writer, also saw like two guys in suits in Sydney. You know, they had their surfboards on the roofs and everything, and they went at it and they beat the shit out of each other on the beach in front of him. And in his mind, like it was a lawyer and a dentist or something. And it just made him wonder, you know, who were these guys, and who were they when they were at home, and who were they when they were amongst each other in that more tribal context, you know? So, I mean, we drew inspiration from things that exist, but then it was all sort of transposed into this fictional place in Australia, this Luna Bay.
Do any scenes come to mind for either of you as being particularly challenging to shoot, or fun, or?
Well, I can just say that, you know, even though this is a character that is really being degraded and humiliated, I couldn't work with a better group of filmmakers and actors to be around, because they are people that not only are they great at what they do, but they're nice. I genuinely enjoyed my time with them. And the movie only takes place in a parking lot and a beach, but Lorcan and his marvelous sense of humor and the script and the other actors, Julian, Nick Cage, they fostered an environment where you felt like you could bring it and you could try things and you could have fun with it, even though the character is weeping or is really having a mini nervous breakdown. I enjoyed the experience. And so the whole thing for me was, with the risk of sounding ridiculous and trite, was a lot of fun. I mean, I really had a lot of laughs on set. I mean, I think one of the things that makes Lorcan stand out as a filmmaker is his sense of humor. It's distinct. Like, I remember we're doing the scene and I've got the telephone with the wire on it, and I need, and it's not connected to anything. I'm like, I need the prop phone. I gotta get the shot. I gotta get the prop phone. And Lorcan finds it. It goes, "It's for you." You know, it's exactly what makes these things that these movies like Vivarium and The Surfer work, is that in the middle of the horror and the chaos, there's this sense of humor that kind of lets you breathe a little bit, but also it's what the process was like. We had a lot of laughs and we were just trying things, and I felt confident he would pick what would work. I wouldn't change a frame of this movie. I think I saw it twice and I'm really happy with the results.
Yeah, no, we had a great laugh. Yeah. And I think like we also were discovering some of the humor in the film while making it. like what was working, like, you know, when you did think about keeping that rat, you know, I don't know if you knew exactly what you were planning yet, but you know, there was a mischievous kind of percolation going on in your mind where something was going to happen.
Him shoving it in his face wasn't improvised, was it?
No, it was totally mischievous. And I think both Lorcan and I have a mischievous sense of humor, but what it was, to be very specific, was I had been, for some reason, I went on a Billy Wilder tear before I went to the Surfer. I was kind of in bed for a few days and I was watching movies I wanted to catch up, and I saw Sabrina. And in the movie, Bogart pulls an olive out of a martini glass and he shoves it in his uncle's mouth and says, "Eat it." And I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was the funniest thing on in a movie. And I was just tickled pink by myself late at night watching it. And then it came back to me in Australia. And I said, well, I can use this rat for something. And I tucked it in my pocket. Everyone's looking at me like, what's Nick doing with the prop rat, rubber rat? I said, well, I think it's funny because the tail is wobbling around. Let's hold on to it. It's a good prop. Maybe we can use it. And sure enough, then Bogart and Billy Wilder and Sabrina came back and was like, "Eat that rat." It's a punk rock version of it, but it's still inspired by Billy Wilder and Humphrey Bogart.